Please meet Sandor Hugendoorn. I hope I said that correctly. Close? Sort of. He's an independent dad and traveler, a seasoned developer with over 4 decades of experience and still daily writing code. Sandor has survived the tech world in various roles, from CTO for companies like Ibod, currently, ANVA, and Klaverblad, to being, Capgemini's global agile thought leader. Now, there's something I've never heard before, agile thought leader. Known for his post-agile mindset and provocative perspectives, Sandor empowers organizations and teams to break free from the norm and embrace innovation. He's not just about writing code, he's about rewriting the rules. I like it. As an author and captivating speaker, Sandor has shared his ideas and practices in international conferences covering topics from disruption culture and life beyond agile to continuous delivery microteams, software architecture, nomads, microservices, and the art of writing elegant code. He believes in the power of critical thinking to solve problems, encourages teams to approach software development with a strategic, mindful touch. Discover Sandor, the coding rebel who believes in small steps as the path to progress and the mind as the ultimate tool for success. Please welcome on stage Sandor. I'm sure you're going to kill me. And before we get started, one quick question. Well, not even a question. Yeah, it's a question. Yeah. Craft Hub is 10 years old this year. Did you know that? And we started from nothing, and we built up this huge event here. And we follow the IT industry, and we see the IT industry is accelerating, and it's going faster and faster and faster. My question to you is, if I'm a young guy or woman entering this field today, as a programmer or a software engineer, what career advice would you give me?
I would say, go in the industry, because this is the most fascinating industry there is, right? I've been a programmer for a very long time. I'll talk about that this afternoon. I have to talk a bit more about code this afternoon, but and it's still fun, right? And everybody's like, oh yeah, AI is going to take our jobs. No, it's going to take part of our jobs, which is the part of the job that we were not the best in anyway, but we are good at solving problems, and that's not going to change, right? So somebody has to propose those problems to the AI anyway, so that's us. So yeah, it's still very much fascinating. So I'm sorry about the very long intro. That's when you get when AI writes your bio. It should be like 2 sentences. That's long enough. It's like, well. Anyway, so this is a talk about getting unstuck. So what I've noticed after leaving large consultancies and large clients 10 years ago, and I went to work for smaller companies, which is, by the way, much more fun, in slightly different roles, is that they all tend to have similar problems. And I'm going to show you a bunch of these problems, and I'm going to show you a bunch of the techniques that my teams and I have applied over the years in trying to help companies getting unstuck. And there might be stuff in there that you're like, yeah, we do that too. So good for you. You might be saying, I really don't like what you're saying. That's also fine, right? Not everybody has the same problems. Not everybody finds the same solutions. And there's multiple solutions to every problem. So that's fine, right? So let's start a bit about quality. So there's lots to do about quality these days, right? There's a lot of talks here about resilience and quality, and we don't know exactly what quality is still, except for Jules, of course, but Jules is, well, he's brilliant, right? So anyway, so what about quality? Well, if I go out to the supermarket, and this is in my local Albert Heijn, I'm Dutch, so I go to the Albert Heijn, and if I buy coffee, then the cheapest coffee is always on the lowest scaffolding, right? And then the best ones, the most expensive ones, are at eye height. That's on purpose, right? So the thing you can notice is that if you want higher quality coffee, better beans, better roast, whatever, right? Stronger taste, it's more expensive. That's quite normal, right? That's how we look at quality. Well, but quality comes a price. That's what we usually say, right? It's the same with buying cars. Even if you buy second-hand cars, it's still like the more features the car has, the faster it can go, the bigger the iPad on the screen, the more expensive it is, right? And we're used to that, and that's quite normal. However, Let me put this graph in. So this is always what we do. So we try to find a balance between the amount of money that we are willing to spend on something and the quality we get from that. And we know that if we want by higher quality, more features, we just pay more money. Me being Dutch, that means we don't like spending money, so we always trying to go here. So I do most of my groceries at the Lidl, and Lidl actually has quite good quality, but I'm not sponsored by Lidl, by the way. So with software, it's slightly different. So what's the thing with software? Well, there's a lot of attributes that come into when you talk about quality in software development. For us developers, human minds, AI might think differently about this, but for us humans, it's really tough to meet with quality, right? So the thing is that quality, it's highly intangible. We don't know exactly what quality is. We know what good code is. We've been doing it a long time, so we get better at it. But what does that mean? Can we quantify that? Well, that's really tough. So that means every time and everything you do, you have to find the right balance between, let's say, quality and speed. And if you build something really simple, let's say you build a mobile app to look at the train departure times in, let's say in Hungary. There's probably an API somewhere. You can build a mobile app. You can have AI write your mobile app. It's take you a week to put it out onto the stores. Done, right? And if that is your goal, that's all fine, right? You can build it really fast, really rapidly, no tests whatsoever. Good. However, if you, for instance, work for an international bank, does anybody do that, by the way? Okay, cool. And so sorry about that, but so the thing is, if you have your software to be running for a longer period of time, let's say 30 years, is anybody working on software that's 30 years old? Cool. Yeah, I would expect you to, right? So and that is a very different thing. Their quality becomes way more important because, the better the quality of your software, whatever that may be, the longer and the better you can maintain it. The easier it is to maintain your stuff. So if you write COBOL, for instance, do you guys write COBOL or Java, right? So nobody writes COBOL anymore, all right? If you're looking for jobs, by the way, so good, should you go into the job market? The question was, learn COBOL. You'll have a job within no time, basically. So if your software needs to learn much longer, you need to do much more about it, right? And that's where we get into trouble. So I see a lot of organizations having the same problem. And that problem is usually summarized by this single phrase called technical debt. Who doesn't have technical debt in this room? See? If I would reverse the question, then almost half of you would not raise their hands either, but that's kind of weird, right? So what is technical debt anyway? Well, it's defined by Ward Cunningham. And Ward says, so shipping first-time code is like going into debt. A little debt speeds development, so as long as it's paid back promptly with refactoring. So that's fine, right? As long as you pay back your debt. So the shortcuts you take create debt. And every shortcut you take needs to be sort of repaid. And you pay the interest for that, right? And the interest is, it takes time and the quality goes down. So refactoring, if you can avoid it, by the way, that's even better, right? If you get it the first time right, which is really hard, by the way, then you don't need to do all this stuff. However, given time, everything changes, right? And then Ward says, entire engineering organizations can be brought to a standstill under the debt load of an unfactored implementation, object-oriented or otherwise. So no matter what paradigm you're using, what do you do, functional or imperative or object-oriented or procedural, you will have technical debt, you will need to refactor it. Right? Refactoring comes easier when you have more tools. However, you will be able to get an organization to stand still or even die. Right? And that is where the scary part comes in. I'll give you some examples. So in 2014, I started working for this insurance company. This is their office building. I always use pictures from my own experience, by the way. So an insurance company, and this insurance company had on-premise legacy. They had a mainframe in the basement, right? Does anybody of you have a mainframe in the basement? You might have, right? Cool. Their mainframe, it's not this one, it's the same model, by the way, but I couldn't find a picture of it, and they didn't let me in there, by the way. So, the basement is for, right, SREs and people like that, right? So, the thing to be running it, just running it, cost €1 million per year. And the problem was that the software that was running on it was written in kind of old languages. Now, this is COBOL. Some dialect, there's a lot of them. And the problem with this code was, well, there's lots of problems with this code. First of all, it's in Dutch. That's what people did those days, right? This company actually writes all their code in Dutch, which is really confusing, by the way. Even if you know Dutch, it gets like get klant, which means get customer. However, klant is a Dutch, that's weird. So in COBOL, they did the same, right? Everything's in Dutch. The commands are in Dutch, the code is in Dutch. And the worst part about it is that, well, variable names were really short at that point in time because they didn't have all the space, right, that we have now. So they needed to abbreviate everything. As a result, nobody outside the people who wrote the code know how to work this code. That is a problem, especially because, well, COBOL is an old language, right? And that means that the people who write COBOL, they're also old. At some point, these people want to retire, right? So what do you do when they retire? And you have 18 million lines of COBOL code. That is an issue, right? By the way, they also had 12 million lines of Java code that they also tried to get rid of, and they had failed 6 times already, costing them 12 years. So 6 times 2 years, 12 years of huge debt. And they got stuck, basically, right? That's the problem. I'll show you my current client. This is an e-commerce company. This is the CMO and the CEO. They wanted to be in my slide deck, so I took a picture of them. I said, well, now you're going to be in my slide deck. And they're like, cool. So, funny guys, by the way. So this is a company that has daily new deals. So they started out with a spreadsheet and one deal on a web page 20 years ago. Pretty cool, pretty simple, it worked. And then they started to realize that over time, when they grew, they needed all sorts of stuff. So they built a website, they built a mobile app, and then the website got stuck, and they built a new website, the Next, right? So you all should have a project called Next. You do, right? There's a next project in every company. I don't know why. It's just there, right? Otherwise, or it's a Star Wars reference. But so, and then they have like all these systems that they put in place, right? They created a CMS, took something out of open source, implemented, built a lot of stuff around it, and an ERP system and a data warehouse, and the mail. They built their own mail service called Mail Ninja. No idea why it's called like that, but it is. And they introduced an ESB and a product system, product information system. And then they started doing all sorts of microservices. In Python, by the way, most of this stuff was either in Python, in C#, in Java, or in PHP. And they tried microservices. They failed at it in the first time, and then they put everything in the cloud. Well, let's just put it in every cloud, right? They ran in GCP, but they made backups on Azure, just because. Right? Cost a lot of money, by the way. And then they, connected to all sorts of external parties, of course, and it got worse and worse and worse. And the worst part of it was that they had a limited amount of developers, and as a result, every time something new needed to be added to the landscape, just put it in the system, in the language that they coincidentally had developers for. So that means their 2.3 million user accounts were basically in the CMS system. That's not particularly what CMS systems are for, and it also stored the passwords, by the way. So it's pretty cool stuff. And as a result, they realized that they needed to sort of have data everywhere. So what they did is they just copied it around, using all sorts of mechanisms like CSVs, sent through emails, Excel spreadsheets. They had an ESB. They still have it, by the way, or we still have it. And this is a mess. So what happened is that they came to this particular point. So when I got there, they had not released their mobile app for 2.5 years. If you're an e-commerce company, is anybody of you working for an e-commerce company? Could you imagine not releasing your mobile app for 2.5 years? They're fucked, basically, right? So same went for their website, by the way. The two of them, they had 2 websites. Neither of them was complete, and they were still using the checkout module from the 14-year-old PHP application that nobody dared to touch. That is when you reach what I call technical death. That is a serious problem, right? Because you're basically doomed. And the thing is, what I started to realize after working for a bunch of these companies is that it actually is not our fault. That's cool, right? To say, somebody on stage says, well, listen, you as developers, you're you're responsible, but it's not your fault that there's technical debt. And you all know that, by the way, but it's always good to realize it. Because you know what? It's always the organization. Right? It's when product managers, product owners, managers, CEOs come to you and say, we need this feature now, so stop all the work you're doing because this is way more important. You recognize it because you're laughing, right? And this happens all the time, right? And what do we do as developers? Well, we will build that, right? Because that's what we're asked to do now. And the thing is, it's a cultural thing, right? Most of this stuff comes from for instance, a micromanaged culture where there's a CEO or COO or whoever's in charge who is so powerful that he can just say, now you guys are going to do this, and you just follow, right? The insurance company I worked for, the CEO, he was like a total control freak. I can say that now because they fired him, but I was part of that. But anyway, so you have to imagine, this is the CEO of the richest insurance company in the country. And when they built a new system, he created the data model. Wow, yeah, that's cool, right? It was, by the way, not entirely wrong, but that's beside the point. So, well, it isn't, but... So anyway, so here's the thing. This is the second problem where you get if you do this. It's called the Innovators Dilemma. Now, this is an interesting chart. So if you build a new product or a new service and you go out and do that, what happens is, well, people pick it up and they'll buy it or they'll get it in the App Store or whatever. You add more features to it, but at some point, a few years later, usually, you get to the point that no matter how many nice new features you add to it, people are not going to buy more of it because, well, you've sort of reached everybody who's going to buy your stuff and your technology. I worked for a company that invented the smart thermostat like 15 years ago, and they started adding more and more features to it up to the point that they had no idea what to do anymore. And then they had this nice display on the wall in your room, right? Could monitor your heating. They put traffic information on there. Just because they had no idea what to spend their money on. And they got here, and they got into the dilemma zone. What happened at that point, of course, is that all the other companies jumped on the smart thermostat. Like Google has a really cool one, Tado has a really cool one, I have a Tado at home. And they got to this point. They should have realized that other companies come into the same field with newer technology, newer ideas, faster technology, or technology that you don't need to do a lot of work for, don't need to invent it anymore, and they bypass you, right? And then you're doomed. This smart thermostat company, they got bought by an energy company, and it's sort of vaporized. Nobody is there anymore. They all left. The technology is gone, right? And this is just 3 years after they were bought by the energy company. And the question is, in all of these cases, what do? Well, then you phone me. Oh, this is a nice way to introduce myself, right? But they already did that, so they read a lot of text about me. So yeah, so I'm the independent dad of 3 kids. They're all grown-ups, sort of. And I speak a bit, I write a bit. I try to travel as much as I can because I really like traveling. And I'm a lifelong programmer. I wrote my first lines of code in 1978. Just a nice fact. And I'm currently the CTO for this e-commerce company called iBoot, which is a weird word. It's an acronym, so it's wrong. This is my social media. If you want to connect on LinkedIn, feel free to do so. And I'm a programmer, right? You can see that by my name, because I am actually double object-oriented. So if you see my talk this afternoon, I'm going to make the same joke, so I'm warning you about this already. It gets worse, by the way. I live in Amsterdam, in the Javastraat. This is the view from my window, actually, so it's kind of cool. And I do some stuff in open source as well. We wrote a framework to do microservices in TypeScript, which is really cool. So anything I'm telling is basically about getting unstuck. And the thing I said already is I just followed the just sharing principle, saying, well, this is what worked in our context. That does not necessarily mean it works in your context. So what do? In all of these cases, you had to have in mode what I call continuous renovation. Now, continuous renovation means, in most situations, that's the case, right? Because you cannot just say, well, we're going to start greenfield again, and we're going to build everything that this company has. For instance, we're now replacing the parts of the CMS that we want to get rid of. The CMS was built in 15 years. And now the content department in the company says, why haven't you guys finished yet? You already spent 3 months on it. Well, because we have no idea what's in there anyway, right? Nobody knows anymore. And then every time we build something, they're like, oh, yeah, but you're missing this. And they're never satisfied. It's really sad, actually. This is my bicycle repairman, by the way, in Amsterdam. Cool guy. Anyway, so that means that we cannot just shut down the shop. And that goes for most organizations who get into this trouble. You cannot just shut down the shop. You have to still compete with your competitors. Meanwhile, trying to renovate. So we try to get out of this. And by the way, one point to do this is that culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? So again, it's usually not a technical problem. It's an organizational problem, right? If your COO comes into your stand-up meetings as the tech department, which he did when he started, and tries to say, oh, you can do that today, you can do that today, you can do that today, you're on the wrong foot, right? That is not what you want to do. So I pushed him out, basically, which wasn't easy. So this is the thing what you need to do. If you want to do continuous renovation, there's only one strategy for that. It's taking really, really small steps. And if you think you're already taking small steps, take smaller steps. Try to figure out what's the smallest step possible. By the way, I checked in some code this morning, well, actually an hour ago. It took 15 minutes until it reached production. So I might have broken the website by now, but I don't know. I hope not. So there's a nice quote from a guy called John Gall. And John Gall's law says that a complex system designed from scratch never works. So don't do this, right? Don't try to build the next big one. That's what the insurance company was doing, right? They wanted to build a new system that did everything they could think of. And it doesn't work. So you have to start over with something really simple and small. And then, of course, we have to talk about Cynefin. You guys know Cynefin? You should. This is going to save your life, by the way. This 3 minutes of information, because I'm going to do it really quickly, will save your life. And I'll explain to you why. So the Cynefin framework defines problem spaces into different zones. This is the easy zone. This is the clear zone where there is a single best practice for the problem you have at hand, which means you apply the solution. Done. You can build this, right? It's like the example I usually use is when there's dishes on the sink in my home, I put them in the dishwasher. My kids don't know where the dishwasher is, right? It's under the dishes, but they haven't found it yet, so I do that. That's a clear solution. Just apply it. If you are in the complicated zone, that means there is a bunch of good practice. You just don't know which one you're going to choose, which means you have to do some analysis and figure out which one to use. For instance, with identity access management, figure out which of the cloud providers you want, or you use Okta or whatever you use. Just don't build it yourself. I tried that. I've seen companies try it. It always fails. Don't do that, right? So, and you choose, you do some analysis, and you apply it. You can do this waterfall, you can do this agile, whatever you want. It gets interesting when you are on the left side in this diagram. If you're in the complex or chaotic zones, that means there are no good or best practices. You have to figure it out yourself. And knowing you're in the same industry as I am, most of us will be here, right? Because, well, the technology stack, the tech industry expands quite faster than the universe, I would say, right? We'll catch up with all the black holes, and eventually the James Webb Telescope will just be on our desk. So, that means that in most cases, we don't know exactly what to do. And that's okay, right? It's acceptable because it's all new. If we would do the same again and again and again, we wouldn't be here. We would be here, but we're not. We're usually here. Which means you need to figure out your way to get out of this. Now, this is what Liz says. She says, each of these zones, there's a fifth one anyway. So these are all doable, right? We know how to do this, easy stuff. Someone in our team has done this before. Someone in our organization has done it before. So we can go out and ask. Simple solution. However, if you're in one of these two, you get into trouble. If no one has done it in your context, what do? If nobody has done this before, ever, what do? Well, you innovate. That's the whole thing. Now, Dave Snowden, the author of the framework, says, the chaotic domain, but the same goes for the complex domain, is nearly always the best place for leaders to impel innovation. Now, what does that mean, innovation? And I found this nice definition by Jeff Bezos. You know, it's the guy with the 2 pizza teams. And Bezos says, to invent, you have to experiment. Bam, that's it. You go out and experiment, right? And I'll give you a definition of what an experiment is in a sec. And if you know it's going to work, it is not an experiment, right? This is the point. If you're in the complex zone or the chaotic zones, and you have solutions that will work, you weren't in that zone. If you are in this zone, there are no easy solutions, so you need to experiment. The problem is that most large organizations, and he owns one of them, embrace the idea of invention, but are not willing to suffer the string of failed experiments necessary to get you there, right? An experiment does not always succeed, right? And that's the thing. So currently in my company, I'm trying to move from a microservice architecture into an event-based driven microservice architecture. We sometimes fail at stuff, and we still haven't got it perfect into the state that I wanted to have. So we experiment, and I just pushed one event now, see if stuff responds to it, etc., etc. You try out, right? That's it. Does it work? I don't know. I'll check my laptop after this talk. So this is an experiment. It's a test done in order to learn something or to discover if something works or is true. So it might also be false. By the way, if you are in the Innovators Dilemma and technical debt, and you do not make decisions, time moves on, and not making decisions makes it worse, right? Gregor Hope, who's here, he said, excessive complexity is nature's punishment for organizations who don't make decisions. I really like that quote. It's in my other deck, probably. I forgot where it is. But so I found this word in English. I've never heard of it before. I've just found it 2 weeks ago. And this is what we do, right, in this industry. So we're all cottywombles. I hope I pronounced it right. Oh, that's the phonetic expression. So to travel purposely toward an as yet unknown destination. That is what we do. And the question is, how can you do that? Well, you take the small steps, right? So, and this is what I figured out. Well, this isn't what I figured out. This is why you take small steps, right? This is the simplest explanation I can give you. And what we did is this. We actually said, we need to move away from doing projects. I haven't done projects in the last decade. And you know how liberating that is? Try it, by the way. So get out of project. Just deliver features, individual features, which means you need to break down stuff into individual features and push them out as fast as you can. The second thing is you move to even shorter cycles. If you're doing scrummish things right now, and whether you do it correctly or not, I don't give a rat's ass, basically, but you will move to shorter cycles. Your teams can go in different directions, right? It's not just the 7 plus or minus 2 or 6 plus or minus 2 or whatever's in the Scrum Guide these days. You can move on with that as well and then break it down into smaller physical components. I'm not going to talk about this because this is a totally different domain. I'll be talking about it all day if I need to. So let's talk about these features, right? So what do? Well, it starts with the dotted horizon. So here's the CEO, and the CEO again of my current client. My team is somewhere in the picture as well. And the problem was they didn't have a strategy. And you're like, oh, strategy again. I'll tell you what the strategy was when I got there 3.5 years ago. I asked the CEO, I said, what do you want to be in 3 years' time? Which is now, by the way. And he said, well, I want to have higher revenues with higher margins. I said, cool, let me build some software for that. So I opened up Excel and I said, well, here it is. And that wasn't the solution, of course. So we needed to figure out. So we went into all sorts of sessions with coaches and whatever, right? And eventually we end up with sentences like this. I think we haven't still figured out what the final one was, but it's close to the first one. And this is nice, right? It gives direction. It gets you from the chaotic zone into the complex zone, meaning you find a direction, which means it's easier to find practices that you like. And they said, we will be Europe's leading deal site. Well, we're not yet. We're not active in Hungary right now, right? So I'm not sure we'll ever be. But connecting a community. So we need to do stuff for the community. By the way, leading deal site in Europe means it needs to be multi-tenant, it needs to be multi-shop, it needs to be multi-currency, it needs to be multi-language, multilingual, which is pretty hard stuff. And we move to that slowly, step by step by step. So what we set out to do is to make sure that not everybody was intruding on the tech territory, we set out to do this. He said, you know what we'll do? We need to get out of technical debt. We need to get beyond the Innovators Dilemma. That means we cannot focus in total on the old systems and the bugs that are in there. We will spend some time just to keep people happy and added some small features to the existing systems. Well, we're going to spend the majority of our time on innovation. If you don't set out a rule like this, and it doesn't have to be these percentages, right? This is our example, where you say we are going to spend time on the left side in the Cynefin framework. You will never get out there because people will flood you with stupid stuff that they want to have, right? So here's the thing. This is what we did. We put together a group of people called a tech board. I've also called it product board, whatever the company likes, right? With every idea that comes into it, we say, okay, does it help us reach this goal? If so, well, we ask the next question. Can we actually do this? Is this technology that we sort of know how to do or know a little bit? That's good enough. Is it small enough? If not, please go back, break it down, come back with smaller ideas, right? Make a stage 1 of something. They do that now, like stages, whatever. Good. And the next question is, do we really need this now? If not, don't do it, because you can only spend your time once. And if so, you'll put it on the someday maybe column. We organize it like this. By the way, this is not a Jira commercial. I really don't like Jira. It's too complicated. But this is how we do it. This is the tactical stuff, right? The bigger items. And this is a screenshot of a couple of months ago. We're way beyond this. Everything has moved already down there. And for the smaller items, we do pretty similar. People vote on it every Monday. What are the smaller topics that we spend our 20% of the time on? Which is nice, right? It gives them an idea that they count, that they matter, which they do. And for the small bucks, we have a Slack channel in which we look at every day. People just solve stuff. But we only spend a little percentage of our time. Otherwise, we'll never move forward. Second thing, shorter cycles. You all know a picture like this, right? This is a picture from my Agile book in whatever year it was published. And this is the thing. You have these sprints, right? And people think it's mandatory to have sprints. It's not, right? You can do that. And people say, yes, but you have to do it if you do Scrum properly. To be honest, I couldn't care less whether you do Scrum properly or not. If anybody can define to me what properly doing Scrum means, actually. So this is the trend that I've seen over the last 40 years in this industry. It's like we went from waterfall, like a single cycle, into shorter cycles in the 90s doing rational unified process, catalysis, whatever approach we had in those days. And it went to 4 to 6 months, then DSDM came in. This is Europe, right, not the US. And then we moved to like 2 to 4 weeks in Scrum and XP and whatever we did. But we moved beyond that as well, because basically the technology allows us to have way shorter cycles. And I actually checked my code just now. My code went to production in 15 minutes and 45 seconds from leaving my laptop to production. Right? That's the cycle time we now have. And we do that because we want more rapid feedback. So the shorter the cycle, the more rapid your feedback is. And then people are like, yeah, but what about Scrum? Well, I don't care much about Scrum, actually. I've never did. And the thing with Scrum is there's more discussion about it than there's people doing it, I think. So, like if you look in the internet, like, wow, you're doing Scrum wrong. Here's how to do it right. Apparently, she knows, or yeah, she. Or are you really doing Scrum? Follow these guidelines to be sure. And I'm not sure these guidelines will match their rules, but it's like, you don't know, right? Or it's okay to skip some Scrum events, right? No, wrong. Well, it's right, actually. Skip all of them, basically. And when a team, yeah, we do that, by the way. So when you implement Scrum correctly, the framework delivers valuable benefits. No, it doesn't. Frameworks don't deliver valuable benefits. People do, right? Or AI, in that matter. But and if you don't do Scrum, where does it say that? Oh, yeah, only when a mature, properly structured Scrum team follows the framework, the team can reap the benefits of Scrum. I have no idea what these are, by the way, but people tend to like this. Or this, right? The Scrum Master is a leader, coach, mentor, trainer first. That means it's a whole lot more, but at least it's this, right? Nobody can live up to this stuff, right? You just don't know, especially if you just got the certificate 2 days ago and you just go in and save all these projects. And this one is the worst one. The Scrum Guide contains the definition of Scrum. Just going to read the second sentence. Changing the core design of ideas of Scrum, leaving out elements, or not following the rules of Scrum. You didn't know there were rules in Scrum, right? Nobody knows. Covers up problems and limits the benefits of Scrum. That's easy, right? So if you do not exactly do what we say, and most people don't, then it's not our fault. That's what they say. This, by the way, this quote comes from the Scrum Guide. So when you have failing sprints, like a lot of people have. This is from a project in Belgium in 2013. They estimated the work, went down, this is the island line, and they had some work left by the end of the sprint. And they had that the next sprint, and the project manager said, you're stupid. He literally said that, right? You couldn't say that anymore. That's not really inclusive for the stupid people. And yeah, and then he said, well, you guys cannot estimate. And I was like, true, we don't know how to do that. So, and they also didn't know how to do the work, he said. And then the fourth sprint failed, and he hired 300 people across the ocean somewhere else. That, of course, did not really work, and then they failed even more, and they failed even more. And by the end of the project manager was fired, and the developer still hadn't finished it. By the way, this was software for an atomic agency. Scary stuff, right? And the problem with these sprints is that there's all sorts of things that can go wrong with sprints. And people don't always realize that, but this is the thing, right? Either you finish early, which is bad, because in Scrum it says you cannot add stuff to the running sprint. You need to define it up front, right? Which means the rest of the time you can go to the beach, basically. If you have a beach, that is, but, or this, right? You've worked on it really, really hard, and you're like, yeah, we're done. This happens all the time, right? And then the person who has to test it, in our case, somebody called Mario Lyon, is on holiday. She just got back yesterday, by the way. Now she has a whole lot of work to test, which is in the next sprint if you would have sprints, which we don't. Or you go slower, or you get scope creep. All this stuff can go wrong. The thing is that progress is not linear. You cannot measure it like this because sometimes you go faster, sometimes you run into all sorts of bumps, and then, well, progress is not as hard. If you don't have any progress at all, wow. I didn't expect that. See, that's what happens, right? There's all sorts of stuff that you don't expect and that we cannot prepare for. It's called a surprise. Yeah. So this is what Alan says. Alan says, Agile is not a process. It's not about the fucking process. Agile is the ability to create your own process and, by the way, change it whenever you need. I probably need to talk louder, right? Because of the rain. So the question should not be, are we doing Scrum right? The question should be, are we doing Scrum? We are not doing Scrum, right? Oh, now everything goes wrong. I hope there's no lightning because we're in a tent, right? So you do want more rapid feedback. That's a change in the atmosphere, right? So we do want more rapid feedback. But by the way, just a question. Can you still hear me everywhere? Is that good? Oh, good. So we're a little bit scattered. The rain was louder than me. So what do? So you go into delivering value continuously, as short in a cycle as you can, right? So that's it. So this is what Jazz Humble says, and he wrote the book basically. He says, if it hurts, do it more frequently and bring the pain forward. By the way, this is about software development, if you not think otherwise, but... So delivering every 3 months with a large amount of changes is really, really hard, right? And what you see with companies doing this is they get slower and slower because the more changes you have, the bigger the change is, the longer it takes to test. So eventually you'll get into technical death because the dependencies will kill you. By the way, this is a landscape of one of my previous clients. Each of this rectangle is a system. Every business process they automated ran through this, including 2 of these systems built by our sponsor today. So I'm not going to make the joke about that one today. Crazy. So here's the thing. Jason Gorman is right. He says, missing the bus is not a big deal if you know that there'll be another one coming along in 5 minutes. If you know it's the last one, or if you think the next one will not come until 2 hours, you're in a different stage, right? So you need to get to the stage where the next bus will come in 5 minutes. And that means break stuff down and deliver all the time to production. I think my team is probably going to push to production today. It's Friday probably, so it's a little bit less. But we'll push stuff to production about 20 to 30 times today. That is fine because the delta is so small that we can actually... I feel intimidated by the rain. That the changes are so small that we can just easily test it. And we go faster and faster and faster, which means more rapid feedback. So I'm running a little bit behind. By the way, that doesn't matter. This does not mean you need to do microservices. It just means you need to do an architecture where you can deploy and deliver stuff all the time. So if it's a modular monolith or a monorepo, that's fine too, right? So in order to do that, you need to automate everything, right? And automating everything means that you need to build quality within. Edwards Deming says, eliminate the need for massive inspection by building quality into the product in the first place. That means investing in full CI/CD. That is really terrible. We're going to be stuck here the rest of the afternoon. Let's see if I have more slides. And so here's the thing. Everything you can automate, you need to automate. And that includes, well, basically everything. Your infrastructure, your tests, even maybe writing your code with the help of AI. And then you can, I can almost not hear myself talking. I hope you guys still can, right? So to give you an example, this is a screenshot I took a couple of days ago. I pushed something to production or through the pipeline, and it ran all the automated tests and everything, and it went out into production in about 18 minutes. And that's really fine, right? That means you need to have your infrastructure as code, right? Don't do this yourself. Do not have people manually changing your infrastructure. It needs to be automated because when something goes down, it needs to come up automatically. That's the whole thing, right? So that's where you go. So infrastructure becomes code as well. So what's next? So, oh, wait, I pushed the wrong button. Yeah. No, wrong again. Oh, yeah. So, hey, we're good. We're on the right track. So what's the next thing? The next thing is teams. And as I said, I run a little bit over time, so I'm going to do this a little bit quickly. So Edsger Dijkstra, the famous Dutch computer scientist, says, the programmer has to be able to think in terms of conceptual hierarchies that are much deeper than a single mind ever needed to face before. So what he's basically saying is, tech, he said it in 1984, by the way, tech is way too complicated to fit in your head. And we all know that, right? So if this is the tech stack that you're running with, and this is the tech stack of the smart thermostat company that went bankrupt, they could not maintain this. Nobody in the world could do this. So the thing is that I realized over time is there's most of the stuff in this industry I have no idea about. There's more that I don't know than there's stuff that I do know. As a result, the smallest unit of ownership in software development is not the individual. So all the people who have individual KPIs, that is good for your growth, but not for measuring how good you are and how productive you are. That should be a team measurement, because the team is the smallest unit of ownership. Because there's not a single piece of software. I don't even hear myself talking anymore. It's really, really weird. So that means every time you're still in the complex and chaotic zone, there is, you need to do your experimentation. And what we realized is that you need to do collaboration for that. And we came up with this idea, because I was watching a jazz concert and it came to my mind that usually if you have jazz big band, so this is a big band called the New Cool Collective, there's just all these people playing different instruments, or maybe the same instrument even. And in short groups, in small groups, they can perform particular tasks, play particular types of songs. Software is a bit like that. In order to bring forward our whole platform, we need a group of people with a lot of different skills. Nobody has all these skills, right? I have a guy on my team who's incredible with infrastructure. He's not as good in communicating with the clients, but he's amazing in what he does, and that's fine. So together we push stuff forward, right? And we call that basically a collective, a group of people that brings together the software. Now, in that group of people, there's this thing that you need, and it's called autonomy. A lot of people talk about this thing. The problem with autonomy, that it's really, really, really hard. So for many people, wow, it's way out of their comfort zone, right? That's the worst. First thing I've ever been stopped by rain, actually. I'm Dutch, right? So I'm used to this weather, but it's like it's weird. So this is where the magic happens. It is outside of your comfort zone. When I got into this team, one of my developers, she said, well, what do you want me to do today? Do you want me to work on the new TypeScript stuff, or do you want me to work on the EP system? And I'm like, that's up to you. You know much better than I do. It's your work, right? And it took her months before she stopped asking me those questions and figured it out herself. But she's really fine now, by the way. And the problem with autonomy is I have no techniques for that. It's like, if people want to draw an owl, I can tell them to draw 2 circles and then figure it out themselves, right? That's the problem that we have. And it's basically this. D. Hawk, who was CEO of Visa, he said, simple, clear purpose and principles give rise to complex and intelligent behavior. That's what I prefer on my team, right? Complex rules and regulations give rise to simple and stupid behavior. So if you implement stuff like SAFe or other enterprise frameworks, you know what you'll get, right? And he says this, simplify to amplify. And I really like this. So what we started to do is take away the rules and the guidelines that people had, just enough to not stop them. So this is a crossroads in Amsterdam that I usually cross on my way to work. And I usually do it from here to here. And the thing is, what they did is they removed all the signs from this crossroads in order to figure out what would happen. Now what happens is people get to this crossroads and they start communicating with the other people in traffic, right? You see where the bicycles are coming from, where the tram is driving. If the tram is stopping, you can go. If not, well, you wait, it's a tram. Or if there's a BMW driver in the other corner, you'll wait. So taking away those rules means you collaborate better together. So this is my team again, and this is what we do. We figured out this. It's a quote in French, just it makes me look more intelligent, right? So it basically says, perfection is reached not when there's nothing left to add, but when there's nothing left to remove, right? The smallest, simplest thing is always better. what we did over time with the teams I worked with in the last decade, we removed everything, right? We don't do Scrum, we don't do Kanban either. It doesn't have a name, actually. There's no sprints, no Scrum Masters, no product owners. We don't have stories. We actually don't even write documentation. There isn't any. It's in the code, basically. We don't do retros because we work together every day. We don't need a retro anymore, right? We don't do pull request code reviews. We just work together, right? We don't build in the quality afterwards, but during what we do. We use techniques like event storming or mob programming. We have lean coffee sessions every week where people can come up with any topic that they looked at and that they like, and they want to present that. So we have this board, and you can do a talk, and then people listen. This is online. We sometimes do it in the office as well. It's techniques like this that make us work together. And the only thing we do, and that's probably the last part of this, is we try to solve a single small problem every day. And we realize that with this larger collective, there are no two items coming off of any of these boards that we need a whole team for. We usually need a subset of the skills there. So people can work on different things at the same time. But they get to choose. It's their life, it's their responsibility, it's their code. So what happens almost every day during stand-up is somebody says, okay, I'm done with this. When I put it to production, I'm going to pick up something new. Let's see what there is and what I want to do. Either because I want to learn about it, or because I know a lot about it, or just like doing it. Some people don't like front end. Other people don't like back end. Other people don't like infrastructure. So this is how we roll. We sit together, somebody starts something, other people say, you know what, I'll join you because I really want to know more about this stuff, or, you know, I have some experience, I can help you out. And we sit together in different groups all the time, depending on the topics that we get. We discuss the work, we do the work, we check it in, and we're done. And we go to the next loop. And those loops are really, really short. They could be 1 day, half a day, 2 days, 3 days, depending on the situation. I'll give you some examples and then I'll round up. So, this we start calling it microteams because, well, the word micro is in everything these days, right? So, this is a developer, an ops guy. It's a Java developer because he has a beard. This is 3 of the developers in my team. Francisco is more front-end oriented, so they're probably running some infrastructure now, which he's like, what? No, he's pretty good, by the way. He's really good. So this is another example with another of my clients. These are 2 Java developers and a tester. He has to stand, of course. Well, that's what you get for being a tester, right? Or this one is also nice. It's a developer and an architect. And the developer's like, nah, probably doesn't work. And the architect is still praying. So this is what lives look like, right? And this is a nice technique because it gives people the full autonomy to do the stuff when and where they want. One of the female developers in my team, she wants to go swimming with her kids on Wednesday. And she's like, yeah, I cannot do that, right? I need to bring my laptop to the swimming pool. I'm like, what? Why? Just, you do your work all the time, right? You deliver. That's enough, right? Go to the swimming pool. Yeah, but then I have to book all my 3 days. No, you don't. We just don't tell anybody. So don't tell the company that I told you that. But, and it works, right? It creates sort of like this autonomy, and it also creates responsibility. People feel responsible. They are responsible, basically. And they can do it at any place and any time they want, which is nice in hybrid mode. And a lot of people ask me, does this scale? Now, personally, I don't care a lot about it. I work for smaller companies. But the ING said, yes, it scales, right? We used what they call it microscots, they had to give it another name. And it works on, they have like 1,500 people doing that or something, which is really cool. And they still owe me this cup of coffee, by the way. They never brought me this cup of coffee, which I still need to do. So if there's anybody here from the ING, buy me a cup of coffee. So, in retro, just do it in 1 minute. So, here's the thing. Most of us are on this side of the diagram, right? We're usually not here. This is where you do COBOL, and you've been doing it for 30 years. I work with those teams. They are very good at estimating what they do. They can estimate it almost up to the minute. That's really, really cool, by the way. But it is because they are here, or either here. Most of us will be here, and that's a problem. If you do that, you need to move into continuous renovation. You need to deliberately spend time to go to the innovation and keep the rest of the people happy, right? And that's a dual situation that you become in. So in order to do that, you can create smaller things like features instead of projects in much, much shorter cycles and make them as short as you can because the feedback becomes much faster. Do it with smaller teams or different teams. Think about your team setup. Think about how these people would like to work, right? And then you build smaller components or whatever you do, right? And the thing is, less is always more, right? So to put it with the thing I had earlier, simplify to amplify. That is the thing. Make everything as simple as possible, which, by the way, is really hard. So solve one problem every day. Never stop learning, because this industry expands faster than the universe, right? And always try to have fun. It's a bit of lightweight talk before the lunch, right? Even though I run out of time. By the way, if everything fails, you have tried everything, you can always remove the node modules and do an npm install, right? So thank you for indulging me. I'm sorry about the rain. I do have another talk this afternoon, which is in the main stage, I think, which is more about code and personal and a slight overlap. Water.
Sandor, thank you very much. That was a really good talk. I really enjoyed it myself.
Thank you very much.
I have nothing to do with IT, but I really enjoyed it. I like the concept of your whole concept on how you work. Ladies and gentlemen, beside the door, you'll find a gray box. There's umbrellas in there. Feel free to take one. But I think we're a little bit trapped by the rain, so we have a bunch of questions that came up on Slido. So if you want to hear the answers, feel free to stay here. We're going to lunch after this, so lunch is an hour and a half. I think there's already a mad crowd at the food, so if you wait here a little bit, you'll still get to eat. Let's go with the questions.
Yeah, which one do you want to start with?
I'm going to start with the top. How can we deliver small features if the functionality is so complex that it's hard to break down to small parts which are meaningful and valuable to the user?
Yeah, that's what everybody thinks, right? That their software is so complex that you cannot break it down. However, all the people outside your own organization are able to do it. So I don't believe that there's software that's so complex to break it down. You just slice little bits out of it. Michael Faddis, who was supposed to be here, he has some really nice techniques for that in his book. And I have never seen a situation that I could not break the stuff down into smaller stuff. It's just not, I don't believe in it, actually. So that's my honest Dutch answer, right? So.
Okay, well, here's one that applies, I think. Might the no-rules approach work well in the Dutch culture of being open and direct about things? How about people coming from a passive culture?
Yeah, that's a very good question. It's true, by the way, we are a little bit direct in the Netherlands. So this is a stupid question. No, just kidding. And I actually have a lot of people coming from more passive cultures in my team. I have people from Lebanon, from Argentina, from Eastern Europe as well, by the way. They're not as quiet as the other ones, but and it's a mix. Yes, you can do this, but it does take a little bit more patience and a little bit more comforting for these people, and make sure that there's a very safe environment that they can make these choices, even if they're not as extrovert as the Dutch people usually are. So yes, it does work.
Okay, good. How do you get your businesses buy-in to give you time to work on technical debt in a business commands, IT executes, organizational setup?
That is the tough question. That's the elephant in the room, basically, right? So let me give you a nice story that probably illustrates as well. So the company I now work for tried to hire me about 6-7 years ago, and I said, "How big are your problems?" So they described their problems, and I said, "Well, I find there's a 4 to a 5 on a scale to 10. And I'm like, "What? These are really big problems." I said, "No, because you're not yet stuck, right?" And that's the key to this. If you are not yet stuck, they're not going to listen to you. You have to wait until they really get stuck. So about 4 years ago, they came back and they described their problems again. And I said, "Okay, now you're on like an 8 to a 9 on my 10-point scale. This means you're going to get stuck, or you are already stuck." And then they said, "Well, we haven't been able to push our mobile app to production in 2.5 years. We have got 2 websites. None of the 2 we can move forward again. And the design is so ugly that the A-brand deals don't want to be on our websites." They said, "Now the problems are big enough." And that's the point where they will listen to you. The next problem is that they're going to want to say to you, "How long will this take?" That's the next big question. That is where you need to introduce Cynefin. Because if you explain Cynefin and they have the patience to listen to it, which means you have to explain it in 3 minutes to match with their span of attention, right? And you can say, "Well, listen, we need to do stuff that we don't know yet how to do." And then the first answer they will say is, yes, but we can get other people here to do that, right? They know how to do it. Well, nobody's done this before, right? How do you expect us to estimate? And I still have these discussions 3.5 years later. Like earlier this week, I had a discussion with the content people saying, yes, but we need to have a planning when you're going to deliver the new CMS. And I said, well, I don't know. And they said, what do you mean you don't know? You're the CTO. I said, yeah, but I still don't know. Oh, well, go ask your team. They don't know either. Because we just don't know what's in the old CMS. It's been built in 15 years. We cannot estimate this stuff, right? And that is the point you need to clarify to people. If you cannot estimate it, you cannot plan it. That means you also cannot fail, by the way, but that's good, right? So yes, it takes a while and a lot of convincement and a lot of massaging into the right levels in your organization. It's tough, but it can be done.
I think a lot of CEOs don't like to hear, I don't know.
They don't. They don't. Yeah, but that's the whole point. It's what Uwe also said yesterday. They have to stop thinking that they control everything. They cannot.
I agree with you 100%, but I think the approach, I don't know, you probably shouldn't start with that.
But that's really tough for them. That's true. But you have to be honest about it.
I agree. I agree 100%. How do we make sure that small incremental steps don't lead to chaos?
Yeah.
How do you make sure that they're leading to the goal and are aligned with the strategy?
Yeah, very good question. So everything we do comes out of one of these three, let's say, boards, right? So the tech board, as we call it, but other companies call it the product board or whatever they do, what this group of people does, they come together every week. Every idea that comes into the organization, what we might be able to automate, comes in there. And we weigh it against where do we want to be. And because we can only spend our time once, we usually vote about the stuff that comes in, right? So is this something that we should want? If so, we'll put it on the next column, and we make a sort of ballpark figure estimate, like, oh, it's going to take us 3 months, 4 months, just only a month, right? And then we can say, if this is literally what we want, next question is, do we want this now, right? Should it precede other stuff that we might do with our time? Because the time is always the limitation. And if so, well, we put it on as the next big topic. And then we, as the tech team, if it's coming off the tech board, we'll just break it down together and we'll see, well, let's put it down. We need to do that and then. We make a list and then we go to work. And that's basically it. So that means that every item that is chosen to be done automatically is tested against our strategy. That's the whole mechanism we use.
Okay, super. Removing rules often results in people not knowing how to get started.
Yeah.
How much have you encountered? How often have you encountered this? Which strategies have you used?
That's a good question. And thank you. It's that's a tough one actually. So it's about, actually I was in Dan Nordstock just now, and he sort of talked about the same thing. It's about, he had this buddy that just started things. Some people do that, right? I have people on my team who just do it. They just go, let me think, oh yeah, okay, and they do stuff, right? And that's really cool. Other people are more reserved and they want to have more security and they want to know more about the topic and the tech solution. So you have to allow them to take their time. It's their personality, basically, so they do that. And the thing you need to do is to make sure that they can do that they have the liberty and the time to do that. So the people on my team, they're all taking their own time. They have their own way of dealing with stuff, all of which are good because we deliver, and that's nice. And that means there is no right or wrong. People don't have to necessarily start right away. Some people, I have one person on my team, she always says, I will investigate this. And then she goes off and investigates, and then she communicates with the business. Those are basically the two verbs she usually uses. And then and the next day she says, I investigated this, and I think it's this and this and this. And then we say, okay, go ahead. And then she said, okay, and then she starts doing it. But it takes a bit of time for her to pick this up. And that's fine, right? There's no right and wrong. So I don't have any specific strategies, but I think probably the strategy is let the people be who they are and let them find their own mechanism of how to deal with this stuff instead of forcing someone down their throat. That's the whole thing. That's about autonomy as well, I would say.
I agree with you. And in this case, it also means that the manager needs to know how to manage each individual in his team based on how they work, I would assume. Okay, what do you think about boring versus cool code in order to put a brake on the massive increase in speed?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Is anybody who posed the question still in the room?
Is Anonymous here?
They all are. I'm not sure what to say about this because I don't know what the question means, actually. I find most code not to be boring, actually, but none of it is all cool, but...
Maybe Anonymous already went to lunch and they don't know how to...
I suppose so. That's probably good, right?
Any questions from the audience? It's still raining. If you want, just shout it out. We'll listen to it. Going once, going twice, gone. Okay. Sandor, thank you very much for this wonderful presentation. Before you go, we have a beautiful Craft Hub shopping bag for you.
Nice.
Because I know you Dutch are very environmentally conscious. And inside it, we have some presents. There is a bottle of booze in there, so enjoy it.
Thank you very much.
And thanks again. Ladies and gentlemen, it's lunchtime. If there's still umbrellas left, make sure you grab an umbrella. Go over to lunch. Visit the sponsor booth. Fill up your passport. Tonight at 5:30 p.m., there'll be a closing ceremony on the main stage. And don't forget to give Sandor feedback on his presentation, and also give us at Craft Hub here feedback on the whole event and what we can do better for you. Thank you so much.